Hello, my name is Robert Goodwin, and this is Law on the Line. I'd like to introduce my guest, second time around, Mike Roberts from the law firm of Roberts and Teeter. Welcome aboard, Mike.
Thanks, Bob. Happy to be back.
Yes, and Mike, we're going to talk about a subject that we did talk about eons ago, pre-COVID and perhaps a few years before that, which is an area of your specialty. Mike is the current president of the Middlesex County Bar Foundation. He is the immediate past chair, of the criminal law section of the state bar, and he's a current trustee of the Middlesex County Bar Association. And Mike has a long career in criminal law. I think that's what you started out doing years ago and continued to practice in that area. We're going to talk about something that is in the news today, and that is the gun laws in the state of New Jersey. And I found a very appropriate article with an interesting, perhaps metaphor that is that New Jersey gun laws are changing faster than a speeding bullet.
That's right.
Mike, help us out here because I am confused, and I think our public is regarding carrying guns, acquiring permits, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So go ahead, start from the top.
All right. So in New Jersey, like most states, purchasing, owning, carrying of firearms is well regulated through various permits. You've always been able to purchase firearms in the state of New Jersey, without much of a hindrance. Online application, you're not a convicted felon. You don't have any what we call the disqualifiers. But that purchase permit, it would allow you to get a pistol, allow you to get a shotgun or a rifle, but you had to keep it at your home. You could bring it to the gun range. You could bring it to your place of employment if you were the owner of the business and you own the land there, but that was it. Other states had more lenient gun laws, and they had what they call concealed carry permits, which allow you to carry your firearm, your pistol, on your person.
I have a question in that regard, Mike. I know that you have studied the Second Amendment, and most of our audience knows that's part of our national constitution, our federal constitution. Why or how different states have different rules, different regulations concerning the possession and carrying of firearms?
Right. So the Second Amendment, which controls us all, says if firearms are permissible for a well-regulated militia, and the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. States have interpreted that clause differently. The federal government always trumps state governments, but state governments have the ability to afford protections beyond what the federal Constitution allows. This idea that your right to bear arms will not be infringed have been interpreted historically by different states differently. And then 2009 came around, and a case called Heller was the first case. That was when Washington, D.C. wanted to ban all pistols in the city of Washington.
Now, is Heller a federal case?
It was a federal case. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the court looked at that and said, okay, your right to bear arms cannot be infringed by an outright ban. Okay. The next year in a case called McDonald,
so that Washington law was struck down?
It was struck down.
Okay.
Next year, a case called McDonald comes out, and the court says, okay, your right to bear arms isn't necessarily limited just to protection. It can go outside the home. And that sort of planted the groundwork for what was this monumental change in June of 2022. Last June, case came up through the works through New York in a case called NYSERPA versus Bruen. Now, Bruen was the...
How do you say that again?
NYSERPA, which is New York State and Pistol Rifle Association.
Okay.
Which is an interest group for, Second Amendment in New York, versus Bruen, and Bruen was the... B-R-U-E-N, the chief of police in New York.
So this comes from New York.
Comes from New York.
To the our Supreme Court.
To our Supreme Court, up through the channels, up through the Second Circuit, and ultimately to the Supreme Court.
And what happened?
New York had a provision very similar to what New Jersey has. New York said, it's one thing if you want to own, it's one thing if you want to purchase, but if you want to carry, you have to have special need. And special need was basically an unascertainable requirement that nobody qualified, that the chiefs had complete unfettered discretion.
Chiefs of whom?
The chiefs
Police?
of the town, of the police, where people would apply. Because
So
when you,
I want to get a gun to carry.
Sure.
You said that I would have to have a special or justifiable need.
Right.
And that was almost an impossible stint.
It was an impossible scenario. So New York had that. New Jersey had justifiable need. So the Supreme Court looked at New York's special need requirement, and they said that that infringed on the Second Amendment. And they went as far as to say 7 other states that had something similar to New York, including New Jersey, Vermont, a handful of other states, also infringe on the Second Amendment, that you cannot add an additional requirement that the applicant has to present in order to be able to carry, that your right to firearms goes outside your home and includes the right to carry outside your home.
So when you talk about carry, it's in addition to to possess inside your home. To carry means to carry outside of your home.
To be able to protect yourself outside your home.
Okay, so what happened? Where are we now? What's going on?
So that was one provision of that case, Nysurper versus Bruin. And the other thing that the case said, which was important, it said if the states are going to add restrictions to the right to bear arms, they have to present what they call a historic analog to how the law was at the time the Constitution was decided. So if 1776, when we ratified the Constitution, and then 1840, when the 14th Amendment said the Bill of Rights applies to the states, if the government wasn't restricting in a way similar to how they want to restrict now, it's not going to withhold constitutional scrutiny, meaning it's not going to be enforceable. And it's up to the state to demonstrate that that restriction was in place at the time. So that was the groundwork that the Supreme Court decided. It was a 6-3 decision authored by Clarence Thomas. And overnight, our justifiable need requirement, which prevented about 99.9% of average, ordinary, law-abiding citizens the right to carry, was taken out. Okay.
So they no longer, a citizen such as you or I, would not have to show a justifiable need.
That was stricken. The next day, the Attorney General, Acting Attorney General
of New
Jersey
Mm-hmm.
says,
What
okay,
happened?
we already have a carry statute. Let's just take out that justifiable need component and the rest will stand. Great. Now, at the time, there was a 2-step process for getting a carry permit. And at the time, we didn't make a distinction between open carry and concealed carry. The difference is open carry, you might see a law enforcement officer, he's got his gun on a holster, it's out, it's obvious, you can see it. Concealed carry, it's under your garments, it's in a bag, it's in a backpack, that's a concealed carry. The preference for people who want to carry is always concealed carry. You don't want other people to know that you're carrying. It puts a target on your back if somebody wants to steal your gun or do harm, that they're going to target you first. But New Jersey historically did not have a distinction between open carry and concealed carry. We just talked about permits to carry pistols. So now this justifiable need component is gone. But at the time, it was a 2-step process. You had to apply for your carry permit through your local chief of police or the state police if you lived in one of the jurisdictions that didn't have a local police force.
Can I interrupt for a moment? What is the difference between, you've always heard the term firearm purchaser's permit and a carry permit. Is there a distinction? Do I have to have one before I can get the other?
You do. So if you were a New Jersey resident, you first obtain your New Jersey Firearms Purchaser Identification Card, your FPIC. And
Do I have to be a citizen of the United States?
you don't have to be a citizen, you have to be here lawfully.
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 Meaning legally.
Legally.
Okay.
So green card holder
Yes.
is fine, or you could be here on a visa plus a hunting license. There's an interesting federal loophole that requires you to have a hunting license if you want to obtain firearms as basically a tourist, here on a visa or student visa.
But I'm a citizen, for example, and I would now need to apply for a firearm purchaser's permit.
Yeah, so you apply for your purchaser's permit, and you're going to want to apply for a pistol permit because, well, that ID card lets you buy as many shotguns or rifles as you so please. If you want to buy a pistol, a revolver, a semi-automatic pistol, you need a permit to purchase a pistol, right? That's how we do it in New Jersey. We permit transactions. We permit the pistols. So you get your ID card, you get your pistol permit. And then you have to demonstrate your proficiency in firearms. We're not giving out carry permits to just anybody, but you need to be trained and you need to be able to shoot well, and there's a couple requirements. You have to have training in lethal use of force, which is provided through different police departments. It's provided at the gun ranges, and you have to have marksmanship and accuracy scores. And that's changed recently over the last couple of months, but it was always the case that you needed to score 80% on the target at various distances.
So I go through this process, the process that you just described. Does that allow me to acquire, if I wish, a long gun, a rifle?
Yeah, so you get your ID card, you can buy your rifle, you can buy your shotgun. If you got your permit to purchase a pistol, you can get your pistol. Now
That's
you want
another step, though, the purchase.
It's part of the same application.
Oh, I see.
It's part of the same application. You can't have a pistol without an ID card, but you can have a rifle without a pistol or a permit to purchase a pistol. But if you want a pistol and if you want to carry, that's all we're talking about is carrying pistols. There are
Correct.
states that allow people to carry rifles and other things, but we're not going to get into that today.
Okay.
So you get your ID card, you get your pistol permit, and you buy your gun and you become proficient and you train with it and you can score 80% better on the accuracy. Now,
And you do that at
a gun range. It has to be an NRA certified instructor signing off on you.
How long does that take, Mike, to become proficient? It depends upon the individual?
It depends upon the individual, right? I mean, we have people who were former military, who, grew up with guns. Other people, there were a lot of people who wanted to carry in New Jersey for a long time, but simply couldn't because the law wouldn't allow them, who were very proficient. And then when the law changed, a lot of people knew that there was going to be a lot of back and forth between the legislature in terms of entering restrictions, and a lot of people wanted to see how it would all sort of unfold, and they waited. But once you got your gun, you can test. You would submit a written application, and that written application would be reviewed again by the chief of police in your town or the superintendent, if that's your governing agency, and they would approve it or deny it based upon the factors and whether you qualified. Now, under the old law,
You said before, though, once you have your gun,
yes,
you actually can acquire the gun in advance?
you can, after you have your ID card and your pistol permit. Now we're talking about individuals that want to get a carry permit.
Okay.
So they've bought their gun, they've trained with their gun, they've become proficient with their gun, and they say, okay, it's great, I can go to the range, I can go home, but I can't take it, in my car, and I can't carry it on my person, and I can't take it here in this, scary neighborhood in New Jersey. I want to carry. So, they would have to apply for a separate permit, which is only good for 2 years, by the way, to be able to carry it on their person.
Okay.
Under the old law, and there was a lot of changes made December 22nd of 2022 in response to Bruen and carry permits in New Jersey. But under the old law, you had to apply through your town, and your chief could say yes or no. But then it went up to the Superior Court, and, only a Superior Court judge.
Superior Court of the State of New Jersey.
Right, in your county, could authorize a carry permit.
Oh.
And that had been the law of the land for 50 years. And it wasn't ever an issue because there weren't very many carry applications. Bruen comes out, and literally thousands upon thousands of applications get filed in the various counties, and there's a tremendous backlog.
I read 300,000 applications.
Well, that was the
may be an
prospective
exaggeration.
numbers, but Ocean County got inundated, Middlesex County got inundated, Bergen County got inundated with applications. Now,
Going to the Superior Court.
Going to the Superior Court, and the judges don't have the time, the resources, or really the desire to decide on all these. And different county prosecutors' offices at the time had different policies as to whether or not they had to review the application themselves first and either consent or object to it. The law didn't say the prosecutor's office had to do anything, but there were some counties in New Jersey where that prosecutor's office took the step of saying, we want to review it. So that created a backlog. The judges had a backlog. So December 22nd, 2022.
Less than a year ago.
Well, yeah, 6 months after Bruen, less than a year ago, very, very broad changes occurred to our firearms laws under Bill 4769.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was a couple of things. One thing that they did was they said, we don't need judges to weigh in on this anymore. Your chief or the superintendent of the state police is sufficient. Let's take judges out of this equation. There's no need to have a two-step process. Okay, so that's going to address the backlog. And there was some confusion as to what was going to happen with the people who were already in the queue, but eventually that sorts itself out. The other thing that they did is they said, listen, New Jersey's been one of the most restrictive states when it came to gun laws. We're the most densely populated state in the nation. We've got our brothers of Philadelphia and New York City. We've got all these well-armed, well-trained police officers. We're not comfortable having the ordinary person carrying a gun in the street in most circumstances. So they wrote up 23 places where it would be illegal to carry your gun.
So this is imposing statutorily restrictions on the general proposition that a person can carry.
Right.
And what are those restrictions, and are they consistent with prior restrictions?
So that was the question. When the legislation came out, there was really no effort to try to demonstrate the historic analogs that Bruen said had to take place. And, you know, they restricted a lot of places. The more concerning ones were one's own vehicle. If you had a carry permit, you could not carry your gun on your person in your vehicle. What you were expected to do was get to your car, take the gun off, unload it, take it off your person, put it in the trunk of the car, close the trunk, go in your car, get to your destination, get back out of your car, put it back, you know,
on your person.
On your person. And the concern is people are going to see that. You're now a target. An ordinary concerned person might think they don't know that you have a carry permit. So there was a safety risk there. There was big problems.
I can see that as a provocative act. You
Right.
know, if I'm just viewing somebody arming themselves.
You could not carry a firearm any place alcohol was served. Okay? Any restaurant, any bar where alcohol is served. It didn't matter whether you were drinking or not. The law said you couldn't carry in any restaurant bar. You couldn't carry in a zoo. You couldn't carry at the beach. You couldn't carry at polling places, which the actual Supreme Court agrees with that one, areas where there's government functions taking place.
Courthouse, for example.
Courthouses. And the thing with courthouses is they have their own security, right?
They do.
And they control who comes in and who comes out, and they provide their own private security, and that's the nature of the courthouse. So that there's never been a challenge to, you know, being able to carry at a courthouse. There's no challenge to being able to carry at a school. Where some of the challenges came back, you know, they said, okay, any school or university. Well, what's a university and what's a school? How are we going to define these terms? Is the school of rock going to be a school? You know, are we talking about just K through 12? Are we talking about higher education? And what if I'm in the parking lot but I'm not in the building? So the way the law was drafted was very unclear on a lot of these provisions. And what happened was there was an injunction filed in the federal district court in Newark and a similar one filed down in Trenton in two different cases.
An injunction is for
an injunction is asking a judge to determine that a provision of the law is unconstitutional and to prevent that portion of the law pending further review from the courts. They're saying, you know, this is going to cause actual harm to these plaintiffs, and there were named plaintiffs who had standing who said, I go to the zoos, I have my carry permit, I want to, you know, this is going to
be able to
harm me.
carry there.
I want to be able to carry there. So they had their plaintiffs, and they filed suit. The cases get consolidated before Judge Bum in Newark.
Say that again, Judge what?
Judge Bum.
So,
Judge Renee Bum, B-U-M-B.
And she sits with the
She
Superior
sits
Court?
in the district court,
That's the federal court.
federal system, in District of New Jersey, in the Newark
In the
office.
Newark office, okay.
And the companion case gets consolidated. So it's two cases, Coons and Siegel, and they get consolidated for purposes of the preliminary injunction. And there were other attacks to the law, including filing fees and things of that nature.
So what happened?
The judge granted a preliminary injunction on 13 of the 23 restrictions.
So 13 of the 23 restrictions were overturned, if you will.
Yeah, at least temporarily.
Temporarily, that where you could carry a gun in these places. Well, give an example.
A zoo was one of them. You were
Okay.
back to being able to carry at a zoo. You were back to being able to carry in your vehicle again. Those two come to mind.
Okay, so then the story continues, I know.
So then the Attorney General's office, who's representing the interests of the state of New Jersey, they file an appeal from the preliminary injunction. It goes up to the Third Circuit.
Again, federal.
Federal courts again.
So our state Attorney General files an appeal of Judge Bum's decision,
And the Third Circuit issues a stay of most of the enjoined, or most of the preliminary injunctions issued by the district court.
so we go back to square one again.
Square one plus two.
Plus two, okay.
So vehicles you can still carry in. A lot of the places that New Jersey want to deem sensitive places, you can't. And I actually brought my chart just because it becomes increasingly difficult to try to remember at any given moment where you can and cannot carry.
So as of this date, which is August 23rd, 2023,
Yes.
what can somebody do?
And that was sort of the
Okay.
joke when this bill that New Jersey passed back in December and went through a lot of debate in the houses, and there were a lot of speakers who came on both sides to speak about this, and it was Donaldson, I think, was the proponent of the bill. The question was put to him, where can you carry? And he didn't have an answer because the bill focused on where you can't and all these restrictions, and it's not my job to figure that out, was sort of the answer. But I'm going to endeavor, for the purposes of our public, tell you where you can carry, because that's a much shorter list than where you can't. So obviously in your home, which you always could, in your place of employment if you're the owner, you can carry at any private place, any private establishment, so long as there's no restriction, right? Private homeowners, I can say, Bob, you're not welcome in my house with your gun. I can say, Bob, you are welcome in my house with your gun.
Do I have an obligation to tell you that I have a gun if it's concealed?
No. But if I put notice out, and you're seeing this now in New Jersey at places like malls, if they put notice on the doors, the places of what we call egress and ingress, no guns allowed, a little gun with a red sign through it, that's your notice that you cannot carry your gun there. Because we're talking about private property.
Correct.
On the public side, you can carry in the streets, you can carry in parks, but not playgrounds. Beaches are restricted right now, zoos are restricted, casinos will always be restricted. Even if they're not restricted privately, they've all elected to not allow guns. Filmmaking, so if they're shooting a movie in an area and they got the permit and they've cordoned that off, you can carry there. That was one of the restrictions that was prohibited, but now it was enjoined, and that wasn't stayed. Airports are interesting, and that's still up for debate. At curbside drop-off, you can carry, but once you step foot in the terminal right now,
You can't.
you can't, unless you're disclosing it per TSA guidelines and everything like that. It's going, in your luggage, so to speak. Places you can't carry are again, they're the obvious ones. They're child care facilities, shelters, medical offices, schools, of course, cannabis retail dispensaries, places that, again, serve alcohol. Now, it was already illegal for you to be carrying if you were intoxicated or drinking, but the restriction, again, says you can't carry in any place alcohol is served. You may not drink a day in your life, but if you're going to a restaurant, you're going to a Chili's, you're going to any place that has a liquor license, under the current law, you can't carry your gun there.
What is the can I carry? I mean, I think you've answered the question, but I have a concealed weapon carry permit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And may I carry concealed on the public streets of the town in which I live?
You can. So if you're walking your dog at night, you can have your gun on you. You're going to walk through town, you're fine. But you got to be aware of all these little restricted areas, and it would be easy to wander into one unintentionally. And
For example, if I am in a park, I can carry, I believe you said?
in a park, but not a playground.
Right, so if I wander into a playground, I'm not being really aware of my surroundings, and
It could be a problem for
that
you.
could be
It could be a problem. So what would the consequences
yes, that's
be?
the question.
It's not clear, right? We have the firearms permitting statutes are in our 2C code, which is our criminal code under Chapter 58. The unlawful possession of firearms is under a different chapter, which is 2C 39.
Okay, two separate sections
Two separate
of our
sections, and
New
they-
Jersey statutes.
Right.
Okay.
And the general rule is it's unlawful for everybody to carry guns unless you have an exception or you've got the requisite permit, right? I would imagine.
An exception would be a police officer, perhaps?
Sure,
Okay.
police officer.
Okay.
There's
Military, perhaps, under certain circumstances. Okay, so now I have my permit. Go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So the question is, if you are found to be in a place where you shouldn't be, could you be prosecuted under the firearm statutes? That's not entirely clear. What's more likely is you can get hit with a trespass violation. What will absolutely happen, and I'm seeing it happening already, is the county is filing applications to forfeit your permits. They're coming in, they're saying you're not obeying the law, we're going to take your permit away, we're also going to take your guns away too. And they're going, and they're filing these applications. And
So it's a forfeiture action to...
it's a forfeiture action, yeah, to not just take away your Second Amendment rights, but the actual property that you already own. A few cases have come up through New Jersey that have examined that.
Where do we stand on that issue right now?
It's unclear. A case came out called MU, which said a lot of things. MU said that our danger to public health, safety, welfare provision, which was the broadest disqualifier that we have in our code. That's you're not a convicted felon, you don't have a mental health history, there's no restraining order, but there's just something about you and your interactions in the past with the police that make me, the chief, feel that you having a gun would present a danger to public health, safety, welfare. That was challenged on constitutional grounds after the Bruin decision, and MU said it was constitutional. MU went a couple steps further. They said expunge records. This idea, and I know you've had speakers talk about expungements before.
And Mike, we have to wrap it up. I've gotten the sign, but go ahead. We've had expungements
So
before. Go ahead.
expunge records are now admissible at these permit hearings.
Oh.
Mental health expunge records are admissible, but the police should not be able to come in and take your property that you already own. But that's being challenged by the state. It's going up to the Supreme Court. And another recent case, they sort of re-examined that, and they said, well, if we already have your gun and we feel you're disqualified, we're not obligated to give it back to you.
So we're in a state of flux right now, and I assume that's being challenged as well. You said it's up before the Supreme Court. And just to conclude is, what else can we foresee happening in the very, very near future?
There's going to be a lot of changes to the gun law in terms of sensitive places, magazine capacity. We're a 10 limit round. There's challenges to that. There's challenges to our definition of assault rifles. There's going to be challenges both sides back and forth with this idea that, and I think we can all agree that nobody wants dangerous instruments in the hands of dangerous people. But the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is part of our Constitution, and people hold that very dearly.
Well, Mike, thank you for a really edifying exposition of the subject, and it is complicated, and I don't think that our citizens of the state of New Jersey are being given a clear direction. And I sure as heck don't want to wander into a playground if I have a gun in a park, where I'm allowed to carry. I guess watch where you walk.
Yep. Well, try your best to stay up to speed with the changing in the law.
Right. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it
My
very
pleasure.
much. Take care now.